Hello, dear listener, and welcome once more to our tale of Salem, a story that has echoed through the centuries like a persistent wind through ancient trees, carrying the faint chill of forgotten winters and the bitter aroma of burning wood. Tonight, as the winds move softly through the darkened branches, rustling leaves that whisper secrets of the past, we open the second chapter of this long and haunting journey. If you have traveled with us through Season 1, you know already of the fire that burned through the cold winter of 1692, a fire not of literal flames, but of fear, suspicion, and human frailty that consumed the hearts and minds of a small Puritan community in Massachusetts. You know of the whispers in the snow, the frightened girls who screamed of witches in the night, their voices piercing the frozen air like shards of ice, and of the court that condemned 20 innocent souls to death, their names etched into history as victims of a collective madness that gripped the village like a vice. The trials began in the parsonage of Reverend Samuel Parris, where his daughter Betty and niece Abigail Williams exhibited strange behaviors, fits, convulsions, and cries of torment that baffled the community. These symptoms spread to other girls, including Ann Putnam Jr. and Mercy Lewis, leading to accusations against Titoba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. As the hysteria escalated, the court of Oyer and Terminer was established, and executions followed, with Bridget Bishop the first to hang on June 10th, 1692. The trials claimed lives through hanging, pressing, and jail conditions, with Giles Corey famously pressed to death for refusing to plead. By the time Governor William Phipps dissolved the court in October 1692, the damage was irreparable, leaving a community scarred and divided. But the fire, dear listener, was not the end. No, it was only the beginning, a spark that ignited a blaze whose embers would smolder for generations, casting long shadows over the landscape of American history. For when flames die down, they leave behind not silence, but smoke that drifts lazily through the air, lingers in the nostrils, and clings to the skin and souls of those who breathed it in, infiltrating every breath, every thought, and every dream. Season 2 is not the tale of the fire's birth, but of its lingering shadow, the story of what remained in the wake of the hysteria. It is the narrative of the haunted hearts and minds of Salem Village long after the ropes were cut loose from the gallows, the graves filled with the bodies of the innocent, and of the ghosts that refused to fade away, whispering in the quiet moments, demanding to be remembered. Their presence, a constant reminder of the fragility of justice and the enduring power of fear. Close your eyes now. Let the world around you dim, the sounds of your day fading like distant echoes in a vast forest. Feel the cool night air on your skin. Hear the soft rustle of leaves underfoot as we step back together into Salem Village, the year 1693. The snows have melted, revealing the scarred earth beneath, muddied paths winding between wooden homes with thatched roofs. The air heavy with the smell of wood smoke from chimneys and the faint lingering odor of decay from the untended fields. The village stands as a testament to human error, its wooden homes huddled together against the chill of regret, the meeting house looming like a silent sentinel. This is a place where faith once ruled supreme, where daily life was governed by prayer, work, and the fear of God's wrath. But now doubt creeps in like fog from the nearby Ipswich River, rolling over the hills and seeping into every crevice. Let us explore the aftermath, where the true horror unfolds not in accusations shouted in courtrooms, but in the silence that follows, the quiet introspection, the slow unraveling of a community's soul in the name of purity and devotion that turned to poison. Salem Village in 1693 was a community on the edge, a small Puritan outpost carved from the wilderness of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded on the principles of godliness, communal harmony, and hard work. Yet faith, once a beacon guiding daily life, had become a blade, cutting neighbor from neighbor, family from family, severing ties that had bound the village for decades. The meeting house, a simple wooden structure with steep pitched roof and small windows, once a place of worship and community. Gatherings now stood as a symbol of betrayal, its walls seeming to absorb the cries of the accused, the testimonies of the afflicted, and the judgments of the magistrates. The fields, once bustling with farmers like John Proctor and Giles Corey, lay fallow in places, their soil turned, but not sown, as families grappled with loss and division, the economic toll of the trials leaving many destitute. The air itself felt heavier, laden with the unspoken weight of what had been done in the name of purity, the collective guilt hanging like a pall over the landscape. As we delve deeper into this season, remember that this is not just a historical recounting, a dry list of dates and names, but a human story of guilt that festers like an untreated wound, memories that haunt like restless spirits, and a village struggling to find light in the darkness it created itself. The trials, which began with a few girls' fits in a parsonage, had spread like a plague, infecting the entire colony, leading to over 200 accusations, 20 executions, and countless lives ruined. The aftermath was a time of reckoning, where the community had to confront the consequences of its actions, the role of spectral evidence that allowed dreams and visions to condemn, and the social dynamics that fueled the hysteria and disputes, family feuds, and religious fervor. Historians like Bernard Rosenthal and Emerson Baker have noted that the trials were a perfect storm of factors: a harsh winter, Indian attacks on the frontier, economic instability, and a Puritan worldview that saw the devil in every misfortune. In the months following the trials, as Governor Phipps pardoned the remaining accused in May 1693, the village began to reflect on its sins. Days of fasting and prayer were declared, and figures like Samuel Sewall would publicly repent in 1697 for their role in the proceedings. The ghosts of the trials were not supernatural, but the lingering effects on survivors, widows like Elizabeth Proctor, orphan children, and the accused who were released but branded forever. This season explores those ghosts, the whispers that continued long after the last execution, the way the events shaped American legal history, influencing the rejection of spectral evidence and the emphasis on due process in later trials. Let us proceed with care, dear listener, for the story of Salem is one of caution, a reminder that the line between justice and injustice is thin, and the fires of fear can burn long after the flames have died. As we step into this chapter, feel the chill of the New England air. Hear the distant call of crows circling over Gallows Hill, and prepare to meet the ghosts within. Soft wind rustles, a faint church bell tolls in the distance, echoing like a mournful call, fading slowly into silence as the narration continues, the sound of footsteps on a dirt path adding to the immersion. Let us look back, just for a moment, at what has already been. to understand the smoke that now chokes the air of Salem, to grasp the full extent of the blaze that scorched the soul of this community. In the bitter months of 1692, a year that would become a byword for injustice and hysteria in American history, young girls of Salem Village fell into fit screaming, twisting, and crying of invisible tormentors that pinched and pricked them, their bodies contorting in ways that terrified their families and neighbors. These girls, including Betty Parris, the 9-year-old daughter of the village minister Reverend Samuel Parris, and her cousin Abigail Williams, 11, were at the center of the storm. Their afflictions began in January, when they started exhibiting strange behaviors, barking like dogs, crawling under furniture, complaining of spectral attacks that left marks on their skin. The local doctor William Griggs diagnosed the evil hand, attributing the symptoms to witchcraft, a diagnosis that spread like wildfire in a community already tense with religious fervor. Social divisions and external threats from Native American raids and the ongoing King William's War. Ministers called it witchcraft, a conclusion that resonated with the Puritan worldview, where the devil was a real entity waging war on God's people in the New World. Neighbors pointed fingers, first at the vulnerable. Tituba, Paris's enslaved woman from Barbados, Sarah Good, a beggar known for her sharp tongue and homelessness, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman embroiled in property disputes with the Putnams. Accusations spread like a disease through the village, fueled by old grudges, economic rivalries, and the Puritan belief in an invisible world of spirits and demons. The small meeting house, usually a place for sermons on sin and salvation, echoed not with prayers, but with charges and countercharges, as spectral evidence, visions, and dreams reported by the afflicted became accepted as proof of guilt. The girls' fits intensified during examinations, their bodies convulsing in the presence of the accused, convincing many of the supernatural nature of the threat. The Court of Oyer and Terminer, to hear and determine, was formed in May 1692, a special tribunal created by Governor William Phipps to handle the growing crisis. Led by Chief Justice William Stoughton, a stern Puritan who believed firmly in the reality of witchcraft and refused to accept recantations. The court accepted spectral evidence, allowing accusers to testify about invisible attacks that only they could see. A glance, a muttered curse, a moment of anger could condemn a soul. The accused stood before the court, their voices drowned by the shrieks of girls and the thunder of judges. The first trial was of Bridget Bishop, a twice-widowed tavern keeper accused of bewitching 5 girls. She was convicted and hanged on June 10th. Rope tightened around necks. Feet kicked the air on Gallows Hill. 20 men and women met their end, including Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old church member, hanged. On July 19th, despite a jury initially finding her not guilty, a verdict reversed under pressure from Stoughton. John Proctor, a tavern keeper, executed on August 19th after denouncing the trials. And Giles Corey, pressed to death on September 19th for refusing to plead. They proclaimed innocence even as the noose closed, their final words a testament to the injustice. Rebecca Nurse said, "I am innocent as the child unborn," while Mary Eastie, hanged on September 22nd, petitioned the court for fair trials for others. Yet those who accused the girls, the villagers, the ministers, walked free. Those who bore false witness returned to their homes. their lives untouched by the ruin they had unleashed. Though some, like Ann Putnam Jr., would later confess to being deluded. The trials, which began with a few fits in a parsonage, had consumed the village, leaving families broken, farms neglected, and a community divided. The economic toll was immense. Families paid jail fees, lost property, and faced social ostracism. Historians estimate over 200 accused, with the trials costing the colony thousands of pounds in lost productivity and legal expenses. The hysteria ended as quickly as it began. By October 1692, doubts grew. Accusations reached Governor Phipps's wife, Lady Mary Phipps, prompting him to halt executions and dissolve the court. In January 1693, a new court without spectral evidence acquitted most remaining accused. But can such lies, such losses remain buried? Can guilt remain silent in the human heart? Season 2 asks this question, exploring the long shadow cast by the fire, where the true torment begins in the quiet aftermath. The slow realization of the horror perpetrated, and the enduring legacy on American society, influencing literature like Arthur Miller's The Crucible and laws emphasizing evidence and rights. The crackle of a distant fire, voices whispering accusations, the thud of a gavel, the creak of a rope, the gasp of the condemned, fading into the sound of wind sweeping through empty fields. The snows of 1692 have melted, and the spring of 1693 brings a tentative green to the fields of Salem village. But its arrival feels like a mockery, for no season can renew what has been shattered by human hands. The gallows at Gallows Hill stand empty, their wooden beams darkened by rain and time, their silence heavier than the crowds that once gathered below to watch the executions, shouting, "Hang the witch!" in a frenzy of fear and self-righteousness. Proctor's Ledge, the rocky outcropping at the base of the hill where historians now believe the hangings took place, confirmed in 2016 by the Gallows Hill Project using eyewitness accounts, GIS mapping, and ground-penetrating radar, is a barren slope, overlooked by the village, yet its presence looms like a scar on the landscape, a place where the ground seems to hold the weight of the dead. The great oak nearby, from which ropes may have hung, casts long shadows in the afternoon light, shadows that villagers avoid, as if stepping into them might awaken the dead, stirring legends of hauntings that persist to this day. Salem is not healed. The trials have cut too deep, splitting the village into fragments of suspicion, grief, and unspoken shame that fester like open wounds. Neighbors who once shared bread at harvest time now pass with eyes averted, fearing that a single glance might rekindle the accusations. Their conversations reduced to curt nods and hurried steps. Houses stand empty, some abandoned by those who fled to Boston or Ipswich to escape the stigma, their doors creaking in the wind like ghosts calling for the departed. Others left vacant by the hanged, or those still languishing in jail, their chimneys cold, their gardens overgrown with weeds. The home of John Proctor, a sturdy farmstead on 700 acres, stands silent, his tavern no longer ringing with laughter, his wife Elizabeth struggling to tend the land alone with her children, her property confiscated during the trials and only partially restored in 1693. Fields lie untended, their furrows choked with weeds, livestock wandering untethered, their lowing a mournful sound in the twilight, a reminder of the economic devastation. The trials cost families in jail fees, lost labor, and seized property, leaving many in poverty. The meeting house, a simple wooden building at the center of the village with a high pulpit and hard benches, now looks like a tomb, its walls seeming to absorb the cries of the accused, the testimonies of the afflicted, and the judgments of the magistrates. Prayers at Sunday services falter, fractured by the memory of sermons that fueled the fire, and the congregation sits in uneasy silence, each person wondering if the person next to them harbors secret guilt or resentment. Church bells, once a call to worship and community, now toll like warnings, their echoes lingering in the quiet lanes, reminding all of the calls to court sessions that led to death. The Ipswich River, winding through the village, carries the reflection of the divided community, its waters muddied by spring rains, mirroring the turmoil below the surface. The Putnam family, whose accusations rang loudest, are shunned by many. Thomas Putnam, a third-generation farmer and church deacon born in 1652, had penned many of the complaints, his family's grudges against the Porters and others fueling the trials. His wife, Anne Sr., who claimed spectral attacks and lost several children, perhaps contributing to her vulnerability, and daughter Anne Jr., whose visions named dozens, now live in isolation, their home on the edge of the village, a place of whispers and sidelong glances. The Putnams' farm, once prosperous with 150 acres, feels cursed, their neighbors avoiding the path that leads to their door, fearing association with the accusers. Across the village, the Nurse family mourns Rebecca, their matriarch hanged on July 19th, despite a jury initially finding her not guilty, a verdict reversed under pressure from Chief Justice Stoughton. Each night, they light a candle in her empty chair, her gentle voice silenced, but her absence a wound that bleeds still, her excommunication reversed by the Church in 1712. Francis Nurse, her husband, born in 1618, petitions for restitution, fighting to restore his wife's name and property, a battle that would take years. The Porters, rivals to the Putnams in the ongoing land disputes that divided Salem village, fared better, having opposed the trials early on. Israel Porter, a wealthy merchant born in 1644, gathered petitions for the accused, including Rebecca Nurse, and his influence helped sway opinion against the court. His home, a substantial dwelling with multiple rooms, becomes a refuge for those doubting the madness. But even they feel the shadow, their conversations laced with caution. Children no longer play freely in the meadows, their laughter hushed, their eyes darting to the meeting house where accusations were born, their games turning to tales of ghosts and witches that scare them into silence. Women draw water from wells, their whispers recounting neighbors who vanished. Sarah Good, cursed and hanged on July 19th, her beggar's life ending in poverty. George Burroughs, the former minister, hanged on August 19th, his perfect recitation of the Lord's Prayer ignored as proof of innocence. Mary Eastie, Rebecca's sister, hanged on September 22nd after a poignant petition for fair trials. Men farmers like Francis Nurse, ministers like Cotton Mather visiting from Boston, avoid each other's gaze, fearing another spark of suspicion. The young girls who began it all, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Elizabeth Hubbard, walk among the villages, some pitied as victims of a greater force, perhaps manipulated by adults or suffering from genuine ailments like ergot poisoning or psychological trauma. Others feared as if the devil lingers in their bones, their fits now seen as the delusions of youth or deliberate deception. Mercy Lewis, a servant in the Putnam household, orphaned by Indian attacks, her accusations perhaps born of trauma. Elizabeth Hubbard, Dr. Griggs's servant, her testimony key in many convictions. Beneath the surface, Salem is a chessboard of old rivalries. The Putnams and Porters vied for control of the village committee. Their disputes over land boundaries, acres of meadow and woodland that divided the village, geographically and socially escalating into accusations. The Putnams, from the western agricultural part of the village, resented the wealthier Porters to the east, closer to Salem town's commerce. Historians like Paul Boyer and Stephen Nissenbaum in Salem Possessed, 1974, argue that the trials were rooted in these factions, with accusers largely from the Putnam side and accused from the Porter side. The trials became a tool to settle scores, strip property, and claim power. The condemned lands often fell to accusers or the colony, a silent reward for their zeal, with laws allowing forfeiture upon conviction. Yet terror haunts all. Today's accuser could be tomorrow's accused, a scene when accusations reached higher social classes, prompting the end. Trust is ash, scattered by the wind. Some pack their belongings, seeking refuge in other colonies like Connecticut or Rhode Island, their wagons rumbling down the Boston Road, carrying tales of Salem's madness. But for those who stay, Salem is both home and prison, bound by a silence that drowns, the community's soul scarred. In dreams, the village relives its fire. Men see gallows swaying under moonlight, the bodies twisting in the wind. Women glimpse shadowy figures circling the church, their cloaks billowing like smoke. Children hide from crows that call like omens, their calls echoing the screams of the afflicted. The wind rattles shutters, and fear stirs anew, a constant reminder that the trial's legacy is not just death, but the erosion of community. Salem is a village of ghosts, not of witches, but of memory, guilt, and a community fractured beyond repair. The fields wither, the hearths grow cold, and the soul of Salem dreams not of peace, but of the fire that consumed its trust. As Emerson Baker notes in A Storm of Witchcraft, 2015, the trials were a confluence of religion, politics, and society in crisis, their aftermath shaping New England's path toward more rational justice. The soft crunch of leaves underfoot, a distant crow's caw, the low moo of wandering livestock, the creak of an empty house door, fading into a heavy, oppressive silence. In the quiet of Salem's nights, where the moon casts pale light through frost-laced windows, illuminating the simple furnishings of Puritan homes, the wooden beds, quilted covers, and hearth embers, dreams turn restless, heavy with the weight of conscience that presses like Giles Corey's stones. Abigail Williams, the 11-year-old who first cried witch, has vanished from records, as if the earth itself recoiled from her name, swallowing her into obscurity. Born around 1681, orphaned by Indian attacks during King Philip's War, Abigail lived with her uncle Samuel Parris after her parents' death. Her fits began the storm, her accusations naming Tituba and others, her testimony sending waves of fear through the village. Some whisper she fled to Boston, blending into the bustling port city. Others that she wandered into the wilderness, driven by guilt, perhaps dying young or living in anonymity. In her silent refuge, she avoids daylight, her once bold voice trembling as her whispers apologies into her pillow. Haunted by the creak of ropes and the faces of those she named Sarah Good's curses, Rebecca nurses sorrow. Her absence is louder than her cries ever were, a shadow that lingers in every lane, a reminder of how a child's words can destroy. Her life after the trials a mystery, with some historians suggesting she died before 1697. Ann Putnam Jr., only 12, feels the cracks in her fiery accusations. Born on October 18, 1679, to Thomas and Anne Sr. Putnam, in a family plagued by infant deaths, 6 of her siblings died young. Anne was one of the most active accusers, her testimony condemning 19, including Rebecca Nurse and George Burroughs. Her family's rivalries with the nurses over land fueled her claims. She fits perhaps a mix of genuine illness, psychological trauma, or manipulation. By day, she sits at the edge of her family's field, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick, murmuring apologies too faint for the wind to carry, her eyes shadowed by something beyond her years. At night, her dreams are a gallery of ghosts, Sarah Good, cursing as she hanged. Rebecca Nurse, her gentle eyes filled with sorrow. George Burroughs, reciting the Lord's Prayer perfectly, yet meeting the noose, his strength a contrast to her weakness. "Why did you condemn us?" they ask, their voices pressing on her chest until she wakes gasping, her hands clutching her blanket as if it could shield her from guilt. Her parents, Thomas and Anne Sr., watch with unease, fearing the weight of her visions will break her. Their home a place of isolation, the family's role in the trials a burden they carry alone, with Anne Sr. herself afflicted and accusing others. Salem is haunted not by specters, but by the stirrings of conscience. Elizabeth Proctor, spared by her pregnancy, walks the village lanes, her hollow eyes a mirror of loss that reflects the community's shame. Born in 1652, she was accused alongside her husband John in April 1692, imprisoned while pregnant, giving birth to her son John in January 1693 in chains. Released in May, she returns to a farm stripped of goods, her husband's will annulled by his conviction, fighting for restoration until 1696, when her marriage was reinstated. Her story is one of resilience, but her grief is palpable, a living reminder that the dead were mothers, fathers, neighbors, ordinary people caught in extraordinary madness. The ghost of Giles Corey hovers over the town, his silence under stones a defiance that chills those who pass the field where he died. His curse said to bring misfortune, with legends of his apparition before disasters like the Great Fire of 1695. Villagers dream of the hanged, their faces vivid in the dark Bridget Bishop, defiant to the end, her tavern a place of rumored scandal. Sarah Osborne, frail and forgotten in jail, dying in May 1692 before trial. Mary Eastie, Rebecca's sister, hanged on September 22nd after a poignant petition for fair trials. Her words, "The Lord above knows my innocence," echoing in 1858 when her descendants erected a memorial. Whispers spread through the taverns and hearths. Had we been wrong? Had we killed the innocent? The question grows like ivy, creeping into every heart, unyielding and unrelenting. In the months after the trials, as Governor Phips pardons the remaining accused in May 1693, the village grapples with its complicity, the air thick with regret. Families like the Easties and Town sisters, Rebecca Nurse, Mary Eastie, Sarah Cloyce, seek vindication, with Sarah released in 1693 and moving to Framingham, starting a new church. The awakening of guilt is slow, but inexorable, a reckoning with the human cost of fear. A soft sob in the darkness, the faint toll of a bell, the rustle of a blanket in restless sleep, the whisper of names in the wind. Little by little, Salem awakens to its own doubt, the foundations of its faith cracking under the weight of what has been done in the name of God. The community's pillars, ministers, judges, accusers, beginning to crumble like the dry soil of untended fields. Ministers who once thundered sermons of Satan's grip now speak with hesitation, their voices faltering like a candle in the wind. Reverend John Hawley, of nearby Beverly, born in 1636, who initially supported the trials and examined the accused, visits the jailed, his faith shaken by their pleas and the growing number of accusations. Hawley, author of a modest inquiry into the nature of witchcraft, published posthumously in 1702, would later decry the use of spectral evidence, admitting the court's errors and the danger of presuming guilt. His book, written in 1697, but delayed due to controversy, argues for caution in witchcraft prosecutions, reflecting the slow shift in New England's theological thinking. Judges like Samuel Sewall, who sat on the tribunal, struggled to sleep, their dreams haunted by the warrants they signed, the faces of the condemned. Sewall, born in England in 1652, a Harvard graduate and successful merchant, was one of 9 judges, his diary revealing his growing unease. In 1696, after personal tragedies, the death of his infant son, he begins to question, leading to his public repentance in 1697. Chief Justice William Stoughton, however, never repented, dying in 1701 still defending the trials, his role as lieutenant governor overshadowed by his unyielding stance. Even Cotton Mather, Boston's fervent defender, begins to retreat. Born in 1663, son of Increase Mather, Cotton had published memorable providences in 1689, detailing the Goodwin children's afflictions in Boston, providing a model for Salem. During the trials, he advised caution on spectral evidence but endorsed the executions, writing Wonders of the Invisible World in 1693 to defend the court, arguing the devil was assaulting New England. Yet by then, public opinion turns, and Mather falters, his later writings softening. His name, once revered for his scientific curiosities, like advocating inoculation against smallpox in 1721, now carries death stain, and he writes in shadows, fearing history's judgment as much as God's. Critics like Robert Califf in More Wonders of the Invisible World, 1700, accuse him of promoting the hysteria, calling the trials a bigoted zeal. Other ministers, like Deodat Lawson, who preached in Salem Village in March 1692, returned to find the community fractured, their sermons falling on deaf ears. Lawson's Christ's Fidelity, the Only Shield Against Satan's Malignity, 1693, reflects on the trials but avoids direct criticism. The Court of Oyer and Terminer, dissolved in January 1693 by Governor Phipps, leaves a void no sermon can fill. Phipps, arriving in May 1692 amid the hysteria, initially established the court, but halted executions as doubts grew. especially after accusations touched his own wife, Lady Mary Phipps. The new Superior Court of Judicature in January 1693, forbidding spectral evidence, acquits 49 of 52 accused, signaling the end. No more witches will hang, but the damage is done. 20 executed, 4 died in jail, over 150 imprisoned, the colony's reputation tarnished. The village wanders through the ruins of its own making, grappling with a truth it tried to bury. The devil was not in the accused, but in the fear that turned neighbor against neighbor. Yet admitting this truth is as dangerous as accusing a witch, for it points the finger inward to the hearts of all. As the months pass, juries refuse to convict, and the last trials in May 1693 result in acquittals, marking the slow collapse of the belief that had fueled the madness. The trial's legacy influences American law, leading to the rejection of spectral evidence and emphasis on tangible proof, as seen in the 1703 Massachusetts Act, reversing convictions and compensating families. The soft crackle of a dying fire, a page turning in a book, the murmur of doubtful whispers, the sound of a quill scratching on parchment. Here, dear listener, is where the true haunting begins, not in the specters of folklore that the Puritans feared, nor the tricks of a devil lurking in the woods or whispering in ears, but in the ghost within each soul, the intangible remnants of actions taken and regretted. They are the ghosts of memory, of words spoken in haste that cannot be unsaid, of lives taken by fear and folly that cannot be restored. How does one live when their hands are stained not with blood, but with accusation? Their fingers pointed in courtrooms, their testimonies sealing fates. How does a mother break bread at the table, knowing her testimony sent a neighbor to the gallows, leaving children orphaned and homes broken? How does a child grow into adulthood, knowing their cries condemn the innocent, their childhood games turned to instruments of death, their innocence lost in a sea of lies? These questions are the heart of Season 2, threading through the silent lanes of Salem, where every step stirs the ash of the past, kicking up dust that chokes the air. The ghosts are not bound to Gallows Hill or the jail. They walk in the dreams of the living, in the silences between prayers, in the weight of a village that cannot forget. The fire has gone out, but its smoke lingers, curling through the heart of Salem, whispering of truths too heavy to bear. In the years after, as the colony reflects on the trials, figures like Robert Calif would criticize Cotton Mather in More Wonders of the Invisible World, 1700, calling the trials a bigoted zeal that stirred up a bloody storm. The ghosts remind us that the true evil was not supernatural, but human. The fragility of justice, the power of fear, the cost of silence in the face of injustice. The aftermath saw efforts to make amends. The Massachusetts General Court declared a day of fasting in 1697 for the late tragedy raised among us by Satan, acknowledging the errors. In 1711, the legislature restored the rights and good names of the convicted, providing financial restitution to families, though many, like the Proctors, received only partial compensation. Yet the ghosts persist in legends of hauntings at Gallows Hill, in the stories passed down, in the way the trials have shaped American culture. From Nathaniel Hawthorne's The House of the Seven Gables, 1851, where the author, a descendant of Judge Hathorne, grapples with his family's role, to Arthur Miller's The Crucible, 1953, using the trials as an allegory for McCarthyism. The ghosts are a caution, a reminder that hysteria can strike any society, that the line between accuser and accused is thin, and that mercy must prevail over fear. As we delve deeper, remember that these ghosts are not mere tales. They are the echoes of real lives, real suffering, real lessons that resonate even today, in times of division and scapegoating. Let their whispers guide us, a caution against the darkness within, the way fear can warp justice, and the importance of repentance and forgiveness. Soft wind rustles, a faint church bell tolls, the whisper of voices in the dark, the sound of pages turning in an old diary, fading into a reflective silence. Within the groaning stone walls of Salem's jail, where shadows clung like damp moss to the cold, dripping surfaces, and the air hung heavy with the scent of despair and unwashed bodies, sat Giles Corey, a farmer of iron will, a husband, a man of 71, whose stubborn heart refused to bend even under the weight of accusation and torment. Born in England around 1611, Giles immigrated to Massachusetts in the 1640s, settling in Salem village as a prosperous farmer with a reputation for hard work and a temper that often led to conflict. His life was marked by controversy, a 1676 trial for beating his farmhand Jacob Goodale to death with a stick. He was fined but not hanged, as the death was ruled accidental, and disputes with neighbors that painted him as quarrelsome. Yet he was a man of family, married 3 times, father to several children, and deeply devoted to his 3rd wife, Martha, born in 1624, a woman known for her piety and outspoken nature that made her a target in a community wary of strong-willed women. Giles's name would become a legend, not for his words, but for his silence, a defiance that echoed across centuries, carved into the legacy of the trials as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. The trials had already claimed Martha accused in March 1692 after criticizing the girl's fits as idle talk. Her trial in September, ending in conviction despite her fervent prayers and a petition from her friends attesting to her character. Giles attended early examinations, even testifying against Martha in a moment of confusion, claiming she prayed oddly, a regret that haunted him as the noose closed around her on September 22nd, when accused himself in April by girls like Ann Putnam Jr. and Mercy Lewis, who claimed his specter tormented them with beatings and choking. Giles saw the court's corruption, the way accusations served personal vendettas, the acceptance of spectral evidence that no man could defend against. Before the magistrates, Giles stood tall, his gray eyes unyielding, his weathered face set like the rocky fields he farmed. Guilty or not guilty, they demanded, but he gave no plea. To speak was to grant the court power to twist his words into a confession, to forfeit his land to the colony's greed under forfeiture laws that seized property of the convicted. Silence was his shield, protecting his son's inheritance, defying a justice he knew was false, his stand a protest against the trial's illegality. The law answered with cruelty. Pene forte et dure, the pressing, a punishment from English common law, unused in English courts since 1659 and never before in New England, designed to force a plea through torture. On September 19, 1692, they led him to a field near the jail-likely Proctor's Ledge, a rocky spot below Gallows Hill, and chosen for its visibility as a warning to the village. Stripped of dignity, laid on the ground in only his shirt, a wooden board was placed across his chest, and heavy stones piled upon it, one, then another, then more, the weight crushing slowly, the crowd gathering to witness the spectacle. Sheriff George Corwin, a man known for his harsh enforcement and later sued by Corey's family for wrongful death, oversaw the torment. Giles's ribs creaked, his breath grew shallow, blood trickling from his mouth as his tongue protruded, pushed back by Corwin with his cane according to legend. Yet he spoke only 2 words. More weight. The sheriff leaned close, his voice sharp. "Speak, Giles. End this madness." But Giles's eyes blazed with an old man's defiance. "More weight," he rasped. Each word a challenge, a refusal to break. His silence a statement that the court had no authority over his soul. For 2 days, the stones pressed harder, his body shattering but his will unbroken. Villagers watched, some weeping at the brutality, others awestruck by his endurance. The event recorded by witnesses like Robert Califf, who criticized the trials in his book. Giles was no martyr in life, but in death he became one. His silence preserved his land, his legacy, but it did more. It planted doubt in the hearts of onlookers. If a man could endure such torment rather than confess, was the court's justice? True, ministers called him obstinate, but in the quiet of homes, his name gained honor. Women whispered of his courage as they spun wool by candlelight. Men spoke of him in taverns, their voices low, and his story inspiring resistance. When his breath failed, his silence thundered, a truth too dangerous for Salem to face. Buried in an unmarked grave, perhaps near the field or in his farm, his curse, "I curse you and Salem," is said to linger, a harbinger of disasters like the Great Fire of 1695 or the 1775 siege, with legends of his apparition appearing before misfortune. Even today, Proctor's Ledge, memorialized in 2017 with a stone wall and oak tree, feels heavy, as if the stones still lie there, whispering, "More weight," a testament to one man's stand against injustice. The creak of a wooden board, the thud of a stone, a faint gasp, the murmur of a crowd. The sheriff's command fading into silence. Before the gallows creaked with the weight of the condemned, before the stones crushed Giles Corey in a field of horror, a voice sparked Salem's nightmare, a voice few wished to hear, belonging to a woman far from home, her story twisted by the fears of those who held her in bondage. Tituba, a slave in Reverend Samuel Parris's household, carried the salt of the Caribbean in her memory. Warm air heavy with the aroma of tropical flowers. Starlit skies where she sang songs of spirits from forests and rivers. Her origins likely Arawak or Carib from South America or Venezuela, captured as a child and sold into slavery in Barbados around 1676. Historians like Elaine Breslau and Tituba, Reluctant Witch of Salem 1996, suggest she was an Arawak Indian, her name meaning to atone or to satisfy. Her life a series of displacements, that brought her to the cold, sharp land of Massachusetts in 1680 with Paris. In Paris's parsonage, a modest two-story home with a lean-to kitchen, Tituba cooked meals of corn porridge and stew, cleaned the wooden floors, and watched over young Betty Paris, her days filled with labor under the watchful eyes of the Puritan family. Her tales, told to the children, Abigail Williams, Betty Paris, Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis in the flicker of firelight, were fragments of her culture. Omens in bird cries, charms to ward off harm, spirits dancing in the woods, half warning, half entertainment. To the girls, trapped in a world of prayer, chores, and the constant fear of sin, her words were a forbidden spark, weaving wonder and fear, perhaps even incorporating elements of voodoo or obeah from Barbados, though historians debate the extent. To the ministers, they were heresy, proof of the devil's hand in a community already strained by Indian wars and harsh winters. When Betty and Abigail fell into fits in January 1692, convulsing and shrieking, the village's eyes turned to Tituba. Her dark skin, foreign speech, and unorthodox tales made her an easy target, an outsider in a community that feared difference, her status as a slave making her vulnerable to coercion. Dr. William Griggs, the village physician, diagnosed witchcraft, and Paris beat Tituba, forcing her to confess to baking a witch cake with rye meal and the girl's urine to identify the bewitcher, a folk magic remedy that backfired. Dragged before magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin in March 1692, in the crowded meeting house filled with the smell of unwashed bodies and tension, Tituba trembled under their gaze. "Did you bewitch the girls?" they demanded. At first, she denied, her voice shaking, but the threat of the noose loomed, and as a slave with no shield, confession was her only path to survival. "Yes," she whispered, "I have seen the devil." She spun a tale of black dogs, red cats, a tall man in dark clothes who promised her fine clothes and a book to sign in blood, naming Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, women already scorned by the village for poverty and disputes. Her words, born of fear, were not truth but a desperate bid to live, guided by the interrogator's leading questions. Her confession lasting 3 days and captivating the court with tales of witches flying on poles and tormenting the girls. The court seized her confession, hungry for more. The girls shrieked in agreement, their fits growing wilder, validating her words. Tituba's words became a weapon, igniting a fire that spread through Salem, naming neighbor after neighbor. Her testimony setting the template for subsequent confessions. She was both victim and catalyst, her confession a mirror to the village's prejudice and fear, her status as an enslaved woman making her a scapegoat for the community's sins. Spared by her words, she languished in jail for 15 months. The conditions horrific: damp cells, chains, sickness, until an unknown buyer, perhaps from South Carolina, paid her fee in May 1693. She vanished from history, her steps lost, perhaps sold to another household or freed. Her life a footnote in the trials she unwittingly ignited, with later accounts like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's Giles Corey of the Salem Farms, 1868. And Arthur Miller's The Crucible romanticizing her as a voodoo practitioner. Yet her shadow lingered, her name whispered in fear. The woman whose forced words opened Salem's darkest days. a reminder of how fear twists the powerless into tools of destruction. Her story highlighting the intersection of race, gender, and power in colonial America. The crackle of a hearth fire, a faint whisper of a foreign song, the gasp of a confession, the murmur of a court crowd fading into silence. Salem's jails, crude houses of stone and timber built in 1684 on Prison Lane in Salem town, groaned under the weight of the accused farmers, mothers, church members, even children, locked in cells never meant for so many, overflowing by summer 1692 with over 150 prisoners from across Essex County. The air reeked of sweat, mildew, and sickness, the walls sweating with dampness from Boston's harbor fog and the constant rain, rats scurrying through rotting straw that served as beds, their squeaks mingling with the groans of the afflicted. Iron chains bit into wrists and ankles, leaving sores that festered in the cold. Prisoners paying fees for their own imprisonment or facing harsher conditions. Fees for food, release, even the chains themselves, burdening families with debt that often led to poverty. Sarah Good's daughter, Dorcas, only 4, whimpered in the dark, her small hands knowing chains before freedom, accused of biting the girls like a dog. Her mother's curse: God will give you blood to drink, hanging like smoke, whispered by jailers who swore they heard it in the stones. Dorcas's cries lingering as she suffered permanent trauma. Released in December 1692, but scarred for life. Prisoners whispered of home, bread baking in warm ovens, fields swaying with wheat under the summer sun, the laughter of children now lost to the hysteria, their dreams their only warmth, but even those were haunted by the gallows shadow. Days blurred into nights, time marked by scratches on walls or the slow decay of hope. The jail's darkness broken only by the occasional lantern of a visitor or the grim light of dawn through barred windows. Some, like Sarah Osborne, died in jail, her frail body succumbing to sickness in May 1692 after months in chains. Her death, one of 5 in custody, her property disputes with the Putnams unresolved. Others, like Tituba, endured, their confessions buying time but not freedom. Tituba chained for 15 months until released. The jailer's boots echoed, delivering stale bread or news of trials, each step a reminder of the noose. The prisoners charged for every amenity, with families like the Easties selling land to pay. Outside, the village ignored their cries, calling them witches still, but in their hearts they knew the truth. These were neighbors, not demons. Some faded unrecorded, their deaths by hunger or despair a silent tragedy. The jail a place where faith was tested. Prisoners like Mary Eastie writing petitions for fair trials from their cells. The jail was a second graveyard, not of bodies, but of hopes, where faith cracked under the weight of waiting, some turning to prayer, others to despair. Yet in the dark, prisoners whispered hymns, their voices trembling, as if God might still hear through the stone. For those like Dorcas, released but scarred, the jail's horrors lingered, a childhood stolen by chains and fear. The trial's cost extending beyond the executed to the survivors who carried the physical and emotional wounds for life. Historians like Marilyn K. Roach in the Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle, 2002, described the jails as suburbs of hell, with overcrowding, disease, and cold taking a toll. the conditions contributing to the deaths and long-term health issues for many. The rattle of chains, a child's faint whimper, the creak of a cell door, the murmur of prayers, the scamper of rats fading into silence. Reverend Samuel Parris stood in his pulpit, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights, his face etched with the strain of a man who had unleashed a storm he could not control. Born in London in 1653, Parris had studied at Harvard before becoming a merchant in Barbados, where he acquired Tituba and John Indian. Returning to Boston in 1680, he became Salem Village's minister in 1689. His salary disputes with the congregation fueling tensions that exploded in the trials. His household niece Abigail, daughter Betty, had the storm center, their fits igniting the trials, Parris beating Tituba to confess and pressuring the girls to name names. Once a merchant seeking authority, his sermons now rang hollow, trembling with fear. The congregation seeing the devil not in their neighbors, but in him. His house, a 2-story parsonage with lean-to kitchen, once alive with cries, now echoed with silence heavier than any scream. He preached fiercely, as if to drown his doubts, but whispers of his greed spread, his role in the trials leading to his dismissal in 1697, after which he moved to Sudbury and died in 1720, his legacy tainted. Cotton Mather, Boston scholar minister, born in 1663, son of Increase Mather, president of Harvard, was a prodigy, entering Harvard at 12 and preaching his first sermon at 16. His 1689 book, Memorable Providences, detailing the Goodwin children's afflictions in Boston, fueled witchcraft fears, providing a model for Salem. During the trials, he advised caution on spectral evidence but endorsed the executions, writing Wonders of the Invisible World in 1693 to defend the court, arguing the devil was assaulting New England through witches. Yet by then, public opinion turned, and Mather faltered, his later writings softening, his diary revealing private doubts. His name, once revered for his scientific curiosities, like advocating inoculation against smallpox in 1721, facing backlash but saving lives, now carried death's stain, and he wrote in shadows, fearing history's judgment as much as God's. Critics like Robert Califf in More Wonders of the Invisible World, 1700, accused him of promoting the hysteria, calling the trials a bloody storm, Mather burning Califf's book in response. Other ministers, like Deodat Lawson, who preached in Salem Village in March 1692, returned to find the community fractured, their sermons falling on deaf ears. Lawson's Christ's Fidelity, the Only Shield Against Satan's Malignity, 1693, reflects on the trials but avoids direct criticism, his brief tenure in Salem ending in controversy. John Hawley of Beverly, who examined the accused, later wrote a modest inquiry into the nature of witchcraft in 1697, criticizing the trials and spectral evidence, his book published posthumously in 1702. The people listened, yet clung to fear, finding comfort in the devil's presence, rather than facing the evil within their hearts. The minister's burden was the realization that their words had lit the fire, their authority now questioned in a colony grappling with its sin, leading to reforms in church and court. The faint echo of a sermon, a congregation's murmur, the turn of a book page, the scratch of a quill, fading into silence. Though the gallows were dismantled by late 1692, Gallows Hill, now known as Proctor's Ledge, a rocky outcropping at the base of the hill in modern Salem, confirmed in 2016 by the Gallows Hill Project using eyewitness accounts, GIS mapping, and ground-penetrating radar, could not be erased from the landscape or memory. The site was a barren slope between Proctor and Polk Streets, chosen for its visibility as a warning to the village. The execution's public spectacles where crowds gathered, ministers preached, and the condemned prayed from carts as they were driven up Boston Street. The great oak stood, its branches etched with the shadow of ropes that had hanged 19. The tree a silent witness to the horror. Children whispered of shadows swinging on moonlit nights, their parents warning them not to look, lest the ghosts stir. Legends of apparitions persisting, with Giles Corey's ghost said to appear before disasters. Men heard ropes creaking in the wind. Women saw figures watching from the hilltop. Rebecca Nurse hanged on July 19th with 4 others. Her excommunication reversed in 1712. John Proctor, executed August 19th. His body secretly buried by his family to avoid desecration. Bridget Bishop, the first hanged on June 10th. Her grave unknown. No one lingered after dark. The hill a grave for voices that spoke still. The bodies cut down and buried in shallow graves on the hill. Denied Christian rites until families exhumed them at night for proper burial. Mothers shook their heads when children asked why the oak stood, knowing no axe could erase its memory. The site becoming a place of folklore, with stories of cursed ground and hauntings. The executions were gruesome. The hanged strangled slowly, their bodies twitching, crowds jeering or praying. The ledge's location, hidden from view, allowed the village to forget, but the legends endured, inspiring works like Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, 1850, where the hill symbolizes sin and punishment. Gallows Hill was Salem's wound, bleeding into every dream, every step, a reminder of the 19 who died there, their spirits said to wander, seeking justice in a world that took centuries to acknowledge the injustice, with a memorial dedicated in 2017 to honor the victims. The creak of a rope in the wind, a distant owl's hoot, the murmur of a crowd, the gasp of the condemned, fading into silence. Ann Putnam, Jr., born October 18, 1679, whose voice condemns so many, was haunted by dreams of Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, and George Burroughs, their eyes asking, why? As she woke gasping, her hands trembling. As one of the afflicted girls, Anne testified against 62 people, her fits and visions central to the trials, her accusations driven by family pressures and perhaps conversion disorder or ergot poisoning. Her family's rivalries, the Putnams' disputes with the nurses over land, fueled her claims, her testimony sending 19 to death. Her parents, Thomas and Anne Sr., encouraged her. Anne Sr. herself afflicted and accusing others, the family losing several infants, perhaps contributing to their vulnerability. By day, she sat by her family's field, tracing apologies in the dirt, her eyes shadowed. Years later, no longer the 12-year-old accuser, Anne felt the silence heavier than stones. The village saw her as the spark of the fire, their pity, hatred, and fear marking her steps. Never marrying, she lived in poverty, caring for her siblings after her parents' deaths in 1699. Her life a solitary one, the stigma of her role isolating her. In 1706, at 27, frail and worn, Anne entered the meeting house, the congregation falling silent. "I desire to be humbled before God," she said, her voice breaking, confessing her delusion by Satan, her sorrow for lives taken. "I desire to lie in the dust." She wept, begging forgiveness from God and the bereaved. Read by Reverend Joseph Green, her apology was the only public confession from an accuser, attributing her actions to deception but expressing remorse. The silence that followed was both judgment and mercy, her confession a mirror to Salem's guilt. She died at 37 in 1716, her words echoing, a fragile balm for a scarred village. The only accuser to seek atonement, her life a tragedy of manipulation and regret. The soft rustle of a congregation, a woman's trembling voice, the scratch of a pen on parchment, the drip of tears, fading into silence. As the frenzy slowed in early 1693, Salem's jail stood half empty, the gallows silent, and the court's dissolution in January, leading to the release of the remaining accused. Women called witch, like Mary Easty, Rebecca Nurse's sister, born in 1634, accused in April 1692, released then rearrested, hanged on September 22nd after a poignant petition walked free, their innocence reluctantly admitted by a court now doubting its methods. Mary's petition, written from jail, begged for fair trials, stating the Lord knows my innocence, her words influencing the end of spectral evidence. Some confessed lies to survive, their voices trembling from forced words. Others, like Elizabeth Proctor, endured until pardoned, returning to stripped homes, her conviction overturned in 1711. They returned to a village that shut its doors, neighbors turning away, children whispering their names, the word witch clinging like ash, unerasable, their lives marked by stigma and poverty. Ministers faltered, increased Mather's cases. Of Conscience, in October 1692, denounced spectral evidence, halting the trials, his role as Harvard president giving weight to the reform. Others clung to sermons, unwilling to admit error. But the true spell was fear, woven by trembling hands, revealing no witches, only human judgment's evil. The dead could not be raised. Their absence is silence heavier than chains, a reminder of the 20 lost to the noose and pressing. With the 1711 reversal of attainder, restoring names and providing £578 in restitution, divided among families. The soft clink of a cell door opening, footsteps fading into silence, a sigh of relief mixed with sorrow, the whisper of names restored. Salem's borders forests, thick with oak and pine, fields carved from wilderness, muddy roads connecting to Boston hid a darker map, etched in rivalries and greed that predated the trials by decades. The Putnams and Porters vied for land and power, their feuds rooted in the 1680s when Salem Village sought independence from Salem Town. The Putnams, led by Thomas, a militia lieutenant born in 1652, supported separation for local control, resenting the Porters' influence as merchants tied to the town's commerce. Israel Porter, born in 1644, a successful trader, opposed, favoring economic ties to the port. Their disputes over the village ministry, Putnam supporting Paris, porters opposing escalating tensions. The trials became weapons, the Putnams targeting porter allies like Rebecca Nurse, whose 300-acre farm bordered theirs, her conviction allowing seizure, though restored in 1711. Giles Corey's refusal to plead preserved his 150 acres, thwarting forfeiture. John Proctor's 700-acre farm was coveted, his denunciation of the trials sealing his fate. Historians Boyer and Nissenbaum in Salem, possessed 1974, mapped the accusations, showing accusers from the Putnam-dominated western village, accused from the porter-aligned eastern side. The trials were a chessboard, each household a piece, cloaked in piety but driven by ambition, with over 70% of accusations involving land disputes. The condemned lands often fell to accusers or the colony, a silent reward. Sheriff Corwin, seizing goods for personal gain, sued in 1694 by families. Yet terror haunted all. Today's accuser could be tomorrow's accused, as seen when accusations reached the governor's wife. Trust dissolved, leaving suspicion, dread, and a chart of human nature's dark places, a pattern that would mark Salem as a warning beyond its borders, influencing later laws against forfeiture and spectral evidence, shaping American justice. But the map was not finished. Behind every shadow lay secrets, marking Salem as a mirror of humanity when darkness rules the heart. The rustle of parchment, a quill scratching, the murmur of disputed boundaries, the clink of coins from seized property, fading into silence. The year turned to 1693, and Salem's fever faded. The trials end in May, bringing pardons for the remaining 150 accused by Governor Phipps, who established a new court excluding spectral evidence. Winter blanketed the village green, the gallows weathered and quiet, their ropes long cut, the ledge silent under snow. The trials ended, but their silence was heavier than judgment, the community grappling with loss. Some households prayed for forgiveness, others clung to belief in justice done, but a dream of mercy stirred. Could neighbors trust again? Could faith return without fear? Years later, confessions emerged. Judge Samuel Sewall, born in 1652, a Harvard graduate and merchant, stood in Boston's Old South Church on January 14, 1697, head bowed, with a bill of confession read aloud. Samuel Sewall, sensible of the reiterated strokes of God upon himself and family, desires to take the blame and shame of it, fasting annually thereafter. Accusers like Ann Putnam wept, and the church sought forgiveness, revoking Rebecca Nurse's excommunication in 1712. Slowly, painfully, Salem reached for healing, but memory endured. The graves, the empty chairs, the untended fields remained, a warning of shadows ruling reason, ambition cloaking faith, and mercy forgotten. Salem became a lesson, written in history's ink, of what happens when fear consumes a community's soul, influencing American law to reject spectral evidence and emphasize due process. As seen in the 1703 Massachusetts Act reversing convictions and compensating families with £578, though many received little. The trial's legacy lives in literature, law, and legend, a cautionary tale for generations. The soft fall of snow, a distant hymn of repentance, the rustle of a confession paper, the murmur of a congregation in prayer, fading into silence. Now, dear listener, Let your thoughts drift as the story of Salem closes, its echoes softening like snow upon a weary land, blanketing the scars in a gentle white. Picture the village under a quiet winter's veil. The ground where so many sorrows lie softened by frost. The air crisp and still. The voices of the accused Giles Corey's defiant silence, Tituba's trembling confession, and Putnam's tearful remorse grow faint, their cries fading into the hush of night. The gallows, weathered and bare, dissolve into the mist, their ropes long cut, and their fires dimmed to embers. Only the gentle fall of snow remains, a calming, endless stillness that wraps the world in peace, the flakes whispering as they settle. Breathe deeply now. Let the weight of Salem's past slip from your shoulders, like leaves carried on a stream, the chill of history warming in the glow of reflection. Release the shadows of fear, the whispers of guilt, the memory of stones and nooses. Carry only the quiet, the peace, the soft promise of rest. The story sleeps now, dear listener, and so may you. Rest, knowing that even in history's darkest chapters, whispers of mercy endure. Faint but unbroken, like a candle's glow against the night. But history does not end in Salem. Across oceans and centuries, new fires of fear and power would rise again. Another story waits in another place, where shadows stretch long across the world's memory. And so, the whispers will return. The soft sigh of wind, a candle snuffed out, the distant toll of a bell, the gentle patter of snow, fading into complete silence.